I've always wanted to do something like that. The sentence didn't sound like a headline at first. It felt more like a quiet confession, almost casual, yet loaded with possibility. When Jamie Dornan hinted at his dream of stepping into the world of Marvel, it wasn't delivered with the usual hype or grand announcement. Instead, it carried a tone of curiosity, as if he was exploring the idea out loud rather than declaring it. But for fans, that was more than enough, because in today's industry, even a hint can spark a wave of speculation that quickly grows into something much bigger. For years, Dornan's career has been defined by transformation, but rarely in ways that align with the superhero genre. From his global recognition in 50 Shades of Grey to more grounded and emotionally complex roles, he has built a reputation as an actor who leans into subtlety rather than spectacle. His performances often rely on internal tension, on moments that unfold quietly rather than explosively. That's precisely why the idea of him entering the Marvel Universe feels both unexpected and intriguing at the same time. Because Marvel isn't just another franchise, it's a world that demands a very specific kind of presence. Characters are larger than life, stories are driven by action as much as emotion, and actors are often expected to carry both physical intensity and charismatic energy on a massive scale. On the surface, Dornan doesn't immediately fit that mold, which is exactly what makes the conversation so compelling. It challenges the assumption that superhero roles belong to a certain type of performer. And yet, when you look closer, the possibility begins to feel less far-fetched. Beneath Dornan's controlled and understated style lies a depth that could translate in unexpected ways. Superheroes aren't just defined by their abilities, they're defined by their struggles, their doubts, and the tension between who they are and what they are expected to become. In that sense, Dornan's strength as an actor, his ability to convey emotion without overstatement, could offer a different kind of interpretation, one that feels more grounded and human. As soon as his comments began circulating, fans wasted no time imagining what that might look like. Social media quickly filled with casting ideas, ranging from brooding anti-heroes to complex supporting characters that rely more on presence than power. Some saw him as a potential fit for roles that require quiet intensity, characters who operate in the shadows rather than at the center of the spotlight. Others went further, picturing him as a lead figure, capable of carrying a storyline that blends emotional depth with larger-scale storytelling. What makes this moment even more interesting is the way Marvel has approached casting in recent years. The studio has shown a willingness to take risks, choosing actors who don't always match the obvious expectations but bring something unique to the role. Time and again, performers who were initially questioned have gone on to redefine their characters, proving that the right interpretation can matter more than the initial perception. In that context, Dornan's name doesn't feel out of place, it feels like part of a larger pattern. Still, there's a difference between possibility and reality, and that gap is where speculation thrives. Dornan hasn't confirmed any specific project, nor has Marvel made any announcements linking him to the franchise. Everything, for now, exists in that uncertain space between intention and opportunity. But in many ways, that's what makes the story so engaging, because it allows people to imagine what could happen without being limited by what already exists. There's also something revealing about the timing of this statement. At this stage in his career, Dornan has already proven his ability to move between genres, to take on roles that challenge expectations rather than reinforce them. Expressing a desire to join Marvel doesn't feel like a sudden shift, it feels like a natural extension of that trajectory. A step towards something bigger, but also something different. And that's where the emotional core of this moment begins to emerge. Because behind the speculation and the fan theories, there's a simple idea that resonates, an actor expressing a dream, something he hasn't yet experienced but clearly finds compelling. It's not about certainty or confirmation. It's about possibility, about the willingness to explore a new direction even when it doesn't align with what people expect. As the conversation continues to grow, one thing becomes clear. This isn't just about whether Jamie Dornan will become a Marvel hero, it's about how audiences respond to the idea of him becoming one. And in that reaction, you can see the tension between expectation and curiosity, between the roles he has already played and the ones he might still step into. Because sometimes, the most interesting stories don't begin with a casting announcement, they begin with a simple sentence, spoken almost casually, that opens the door to something no one was quite prepared to imagine. What happened next wasn't just excitement, it was a wave of imagination that quickly took on a life of its own. Within hours, fans began mapping out entire possibilities for Jamie Dornan inside the Marvel Universe, turning a simple comment into a full-scale casting conversation. Edits appeared, concept posters circulated, and debates erupted over which character he could embody best. It was no longer about whether he wanted it, it was about whether the audience could already see it. Some of the most popular suggestions revealed something interesting about how people view Dornan. Instead of placing him in traditional, high-energy superhero roles, many fans leaned toward characters with depth, ambiguity, and internal conflict. Figures who carry emotional weight beneath the surface, who aren't defined solely by power but by the choices they make. In that sense, the casting ideas didn't try to change Dornan, they tried to fit the Marvel world around what he already does best. At the same time, a different kind of conversation began to emerge, one that questioned whether he could truly adapt to the physical and stylistic demands of the franchise. Marvel roles often require intense transformation, both in terms of physical preparation and performance style. The ability to balance humor, action, and emotional depth is not easy, and it's a combination that doesn't come naturally to every actor. For some viewers, this raised doubts about whether Dornan's more restrained approach could fully translate in that environment. But that's where the narrative takes an unexpected turn. Because if there's one thing Marvel has proven over the years, it's that unpredictability often leads to the most memorable outcomes. Actors who were once seen as unconventional choices have gone on to redefine their characters, precisely because they didn't follow the expected path. In that context, Dornan's differences become less of a weakness and more of a potential strength, something that could bring a fresh perspective to a universe that constantly evolves. There's also the question of timing, and it may be more important than it seems. Dornan is no longer in the early stages of his career, where choices are often about establishing identity. He's at a point where he can afford to be selective, to choose projects that align with what he genuinely wants to explore. That makes this potential move feel less like a career shift and more like a deliberate expansion, an opportunity to step into a space that challenges him in new ways. Yet, despite all the speculation, the reality remains uncertain. There has been no official confirmation, no announcement linking him to a specific role or project. Everything exists within the realm of possibility, shaped more by audience reaction than by concrete plans. And in a way, that uncertainty is what keeps the momentum alive, allowing the idea to grow without being limited by facts. What's particularly fascinating is how quickly this conversation has changed the way people see him. Even without a confirmed role, Dornan is already being reimagined through a different lens, not just as an actor known for certain types of characters, but as someone who could potentially step into something much larger. That shift in perception doesn't require a contract or a casting call, it happens the moment people begin to believe it's possible. And perhaps that's the real impact of his statement. It didn't just reveal a personal ambition, it opened a door, both for himself and for the audience watching him. It invited people to think differently, to consider a version of him that hadn't been fully explored before. Whether that version ever becomes reality is still unknown, but the idea itself has already taken hold. Because in the end, the most powerful part of any story isn't always what has happened, it's what might happen next. And right now, Jamie Dornan's place in the Marvel Universe exists entirely in that space, where possibility is just strong enough to feel real, but still uncertain enough to keep everyone watching.